Their pizza is improved defense. Colorado coffee.
I mean, I didn't fuss about it, they really need to figure out.
For a while there,
And
but
they're,
it does come up. But it is good now.
they just was spoiled in being so close, you know.
Daddy went. Daddy.
Pretty much people drive either to Devon's, I don't know, or the park or else.
1998, some homeowners decided that was a good idea. So when it rains,
So it goes over and then it goes
Closer
just
you
up,
go.
so that.
and our house sits up like this, but still.
That's not bad.
No, but we have pretty good drainage swales.
You only need 4.
It is pitched, but it goes this way, and so there's a really good swale on one side of the house that my husband's like, let's go ahead and use it.
Well, the other guy that where you're sitting, he said last time it may not be. I think that's what he said.
So last month we didn't have any work for the month.
It was the month before, yeah.
Yeah.
So that was for last month, so I don't know.
Does our
I
meeting
hope he's all right.
fall the week of Thanksgiving?
So it would
Well, I
actually
don't
be
know, I didn't bring my chart.
see.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order the Planning and Zoning Board meeting, September 19th, 2016. And we'll begin with a roll call.
Chairman Vinson,
Here?
Mr. Carr,
Here.
Mr. Parker, Mr. Seaman, Mr. Gialusis, Ms. St. Arnold,
Here.
Mr. Hassey, Mrs. Protos.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum. At this time, we'll have the reading of the quasi-judicial procedure and swearing in of speakers. After the procedures have been read, if there's any interveners that want to intervene on behalf of a group and speak on behalf of a group, please let me know. And anyone who intends to testify this evening or speak at the podium, after the attorney reads the announcement, you'll be asked to stand and take an oath so that your testimony will be under oath.
This is a quasi-judicial proceeding where the Planning and Zoning Board acts in a quasi-judicial rather than a legislative capacity. At a quasi-judicial hearing, it is not the board's function to make law, but rather to apply law that has already been established. In a quasi-judicial hearing, the board is required by law to make findings of fact based upon the evidence presented at the hearing and apply those findings of fact to previously established criteria contained in the Code of Ordinances in order to make a legal decision regarding the application before it. The board may only consider evidence at this hearing that the law considers competent, substantial, and relevant to the issues. If the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has met the criteria established in the Code of Ordinance, then the board is required by law to find in favor of the applicant. By the same token, if the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has failed to meet the criteria established in the Code of Ordinance, then the board is required by law to find against the applicant. Are there any board members wishing to disclose any ex parte communications this evening?
See none?
Seeing none, anyone wishing to testify or speak this evening, please stand and be sworn in and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
So sworn.
Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is the approval of minutes for March 21, 2016. Well, I was going to see if we had any objection to doing all three at once. Can we do all three at once?
Yes.
You can do all three at once, but there was one correction that doesn't show in your minutes that are in your packet, but it's in the minutes for the chairman to sign. Nil's name was spelled incorrectly, so that's been corrected and changed. We caught it before this meeting, so I'm just bringing that to your attention. So your minutes, that are the official minutes, have been edited to reflect that change.
I wouldn't catch that change of spelling. Anyway, thank you very much. Since it's a minor change, we'll go ahead and take all three at once unless there's an objection by any of the board members.
No objections.
Is there a motion regarding all three of these meetings? It's March 21, 2016, April 18, 2016, and May 16, 2016.
I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes of 3/21, 4/18, and 5/16, 2016 as they stand.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. We'll take a vote. Thank you.
Mrs. Protos,
Yes.
Mr. Carr,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman, Ms. St. Arnold,
Yes.
Chairman Vinson.
Yes. Okay. Next item on the agenda is application number 16-51, site plan for Tarpon Retail Plaza Resolution 2016-23. It's a request to approve a site plan for a fast food restaurant out parcel at 40545 US Highway 19 North. Well, 19's not there, but it's 19 North. It's the former Office Depot site, for those that are familiar with the highway. And we'll begin with the report from the staff.
Yes, for the record, Lisa Wargo, Principal Planner. This is application 16-51 for site plan approval for Tarpon Retail Plaza Phase 2. The applicant is SI Florida, LLC. The owner is 2300 Restaurant, LLC. The request is for site plan approval for Phase 2 of a retail project located on .61 acres of a 2.88 acre property for the construction of a 3,279 square foot drive-through restaurant. The general location is the southeast corner of the intersection of Lake Street and US Highway 19. The land use is commercial general. The zoning district is highway business. Phase 2 of the project proposes the construction of a 3,279 square foot drive-through restaurant with a bypass lane. The project site is an out parcel consisting of .61 acres and a floor area ratio of 0.14. This is a reconfiguration of a former Office Depot building site. Proposed drive-through restaurant provides an additional 23 parking spaces plus 2 additional accessible spaces, and the applicant will enter into a cross-shared parking agreement with the Phase 1 portion of the site and provide a total of 104 parking spaces for the entire project. The drive-through provides for an additional 10 queuing vehicles with a bypass lane to facilitate traffic flow. The project did not exceed the threshold to warrant a traffic impact analysis. Additional landscaping is being provided along the perimeter of the project, the drive-through area, and the existing stormwater retention area. The proposed retail development is consistent with the commercial general future land use assigned to the property and all other requirements of the comprehensive plan. The plan is consistent with the highway business zoning designation. The site plan is consistent with the future land use plan and the corresponding policies of the comprehensive plan. The proposed project meets the concurrency management standards of Section 122 of the Land Development Code pursuant to the requirements for a certificate of concurrency for potable water, sanitary sewer, solid waste disposal, stormwater management, and recreation open space. Additionally, the project will not result in decreases below adopted levels of service for potable water, sanitary sewer, solid waste, recreational facilities, or stormwater management. Project is required to meet all the city building codes upon application for construction drawings and individual building permits. The Technical Review Committee reviewed this application on May 26, 2016, and August 11, 2016, and August 25th, 2016, and has determined the application for site plan approval to be complete and in compliance with the above cited standards for review, subject to the conditions recommended below. Staff finds the application for site plan approval consistent with the applicable review criteria, and therefore the staff recommendation is to approve the site plan subject to the following conditions. The developer is responsible for acquiring all other jurisdictional permits or approvals and for meeting the minimum criteria of the Land Development Code, including compliance with Article 17 Public Art Program. A cross-parking agreement shall be completed with the main parcel to utilize 17 spaces of overflow parking for the drive-through out parcel at the time of platting. The applicant must mitigate for any tree removal at the time of permitting pursuant to LDC Section 133.06. Water and sewer infrastructure shall be privately owned and maintained. The applicant shall demonstrate to the satisfaction of the Public Services Department that the proposed design of water system meets needed fire flows prior to issuance of any permits. Construction plans shall be consistent with the approved site plan. The payment of all requisite fees attendant to the project shall be paid in accordance with the Land Development Code. This site plan shall expire within 1 year of the effective date unless an application has been filed for a building permit with construction plans signed and sealed by a registered engineer licensed in the state of Florida. Condition number 8, we will be retracting. We didn't feel it was necessary at this time.
Can you say why?
Remove it. Remove it.
At this time, the development of this particular parcel, if they choose at a future date to actually separate out that, that fast food restaurant, they can come through the planning process and do that. It doesn't necessarily need to be a condition of their approval that they plat. They may choose to keep that under a single ownership and basically rent it out, where they do a franchise agreement, a lease agreement with a franchisee. And if they choose to do that, we want to leave that option open to them until they know who the vendor's actually going to be. It's really premature to talk about platting, other than to make sure that we have the requirement that the entire site functions well, and if then it's separated off, there are the requirements for cross access, cross parking, and cross drainage that'll be in place, and the applicant is aware of those requirements.
So at this time, you're saying there is no vendor for the fast food?
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you. Any questions for staff by the board members?
That's, I wanted to do
I've got some questions. That parking is a big concern for me because, like with Mugs and Jugs, when that came up in front of us, we didn't really hammer that hard enough, I don't think. And if someone were to separate it off and sell it, and then you've got the two business owners in a argument of some sort, you've got how many parking spots at the fast food restaurant? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 12. There's not 23 there. There's maybe 12 parking spots. I mean,
Well,
am I
what
missing
they just
the
said
other?
was,
No, there are 23.
Or is that again along the frontage of 19?
Yes.
Because additional parking, you're actually eliminating parking. We're not putting additional parking in there, which stated in our backup here. So can you point out where the additional 23 spots are going to be at? Because I'm missing that somewhere here. Because I'm looking at like a bunch of parking spots that are putting a building on top of the parking spots, and it's actually eliminating
Okay,
a ton of
so
spots.
the building in phase 1, the existing building, has been changed as a result of the phase 1 improvements that were authorized under the minor modification process in your land development code. Allows for modification of existing buildings where it doesn't meet certain thresholds. Unfortunately, or fortunately in this case, the second phase does meet that threshold. So in the first phase, they reduced the size of the building and changed the uses in the building. So as a result, the number of parking spaces that was needed for that first phase was reduced. So that's why you're seeing parking spaces that are able to be eliminated to allow for an out parcel to put this unit on. There are 23 spaces that are shown that are not new, they're somewhat reconfigured from the existing parking lot to allow for the design of that fast food restaurant. Along with that, there is a stipulation in the conditions that they will need to have a cross access or a cross parking agreement that will basically set down in stone at the time that this is platted, which is when they're separated. You can actually sell the property off. That's at platting. That's when you allow that to happen. As a result, then there will be the requirement that they share that parking, just like they'll be required to have a cross access agreement so they can access between the parking lot, and they'll also have a cross drainage agreement at that time so that the drainage will cross between those properties. Those are all required if you're going to separate any of the property on this piece of property at any point in time. That's what's required. So the spaces are reconfigured spaces as a result of the design change to allow for that fast food restaurant, but the larger building that was existing on that property, the size of that building has been cut back and reduced because it's going to be modified. It's no longer going to be a single tenant building, it's going to be a multi-tenant building. That was done under their phase 1, which was approved by TRC. We're here to discuss phase 2. So that's really where the parking changes are coming about.
So it's behind the building is where the additional parking spots are.
The 104 are all there, and what Lisa was referring to was the parking spaces along the front and the parking spaces along US 19 in that area of that small out parcel.
So let's say it's separated off and sold off 2 years from now. The owner's getting a bitter fight of some sort because you have the restaurants parking in front of all the frontages of all the other buildings, and their patrons can't get to those parking spots. So at that point, is that agreement in place to where it can't be lifted, or is that going to be
the agreement is basically what happens is it's like a restrictive covenant that's placed on the property at the time of platting. Okay, so when these are physically separated into two separate units, you basically draw the line down the middle. They will never be self-sustaining parcels. They can't, based on the design of their drainage, based on the design of their parking, and based on design of their access. Okay, they're going to have to be joint tenancy and have the attendant agreements that are required at the time of platting for that. That's what the staff requires at the time of platting when you have cross access, cross parking, and or cross drainage agreements. Some cases you have further restrictive covenants and require an association to be established. Those are all things that happen during the platting phase, because that's when the ownership piece separates between owners.
How far can the spaces be from the business? For instance, like, let's say, this is an example. We have like our Anytime or Snap Fitness in the Great Clips parking lot that's connected to Publix. Can those be considered? Because that's a heck of a way down, but there's still parking spots that are connected. And so I think it's looking at the same situation with these back parking spots. If that's connecting to the fast food restaurant, is there a concern from staff about how far those are away?
There's no distancing criteria, and there's nothing in planning practice that would require parking spaces to be at a certain distance from a building, with the exception of accessible parking. Accessible parking in ADA compliance is a different animal than general parking. General parking, you do not have any regulations in your code currently, and I have not seen any regulations in most codes that dictate how far parking can be from a specific business, especially when you have a multi-tenant, multi-use site. Generally, parking is one of those things that is shared between those tenants. And it's generally part of either their leasing agreements, either it's open parking like it is in the Mugs and Jugs Plaza. Part of the concerns with the folks that are in Mugs and Jugs Plaza outside of Mugs and Jugs is that they have an open parking lease program that's part of their lease. That's not something that the city gets involved in. How a individual property owner regulates the uses on his property as far as how many parking spaces and things that he's assigned, that particular project was done at the shopping center rate, just like this one's done at the shopping center rate, with the caveat that we made sure that they had sufficient parking to sustain that particular drive-through restaurant over the entire site, rather than just requiring it on that one out parcel. So over the entire site, everything is covered at the shopping center rate and or under the fast food rate, to make sure that there was sufficient parking for those uses.
I see it being a problem at some point.
Explain again, if you will, for me, I'm a little slow, how this building that's in existence is now a smaller building. Did they tear some
I'm going
of
to
it
actually
out?
let the applicant can actually explain to you what changes that they did to the existing Office Depot site, so that you can kind of understand the changes, because what you see here is really the changes that have been done, not the original building.
Before we hear from the applicant, or any of the board members that have a question of the staff.
Well, they'll still be able to use that one area to get out easier too, with the light.
Can you speak in your microphone? I can't hear you over here.
Use your microphone.
Question, but
Ms. Protos, please,
I just want to
get
make
close to your
sure,
microphone, please.
that that road that comes out from Office Depot, unless they're not going to be parking along the side there.
No,
Yeah,
there's no parking on the actual access drive.
because that's what's happened out at Mugs and Jugs on weekends. It's just totally crazy there with all the cars.
They park where
And
they
I
can
just,
park.
yeah, they just can't park, and they're in the right of ways too. So all of theirs really is going to be contained on the site.
That is correct.
Theoretically.
Okay, now we'll hear from the applicant, sir.
Yes, sir. J.D. Al-Sabbar, Sycamore Engineering, 8370 West Hillsborough Avenue, Suite 205, Tampa, Florida, 33615. I already sworn, and I'm representing, of course, the owner, the developer. The site, as mentioned by the staff, is existing office depot, which has, as we see in the survey, we have to close to 50,000 square foot building right now, which is the survey show it very clearly what we have. The proposed site is about 22 to 23 reduction of that building from about 50,000 to 22 or 23 as we see it, and that what Ms. will discuss that will be phase 1. Phase 2, which the subject of our application now, is the drive-through restaurant, which is 3,300 square foot, proposed in the northern side of the property with the drive-through. Now, as mentioned completely, and I agree on everything said, this parcel is integrated, or in fact, those two buildings in one site, integrated in one site completely. They're going to have one stormwater pond serving both of them. They're going to have one lift station serving both of them. And because we're going to create a stop out, serve the proposed drive-through restaurant. And we're going to have, of course, a new connection to the water on US 19, which requested also to get approval for. So the site overall is really one site, even, and that based on that, the staff went and asked for the easement, cross-access easement, parking, utilities, stormwater, which is part of what we need to do in this. Any question to answer here? And we are in full agreement with the condition with the staff.
Thank you, sir. Questions for the applicant, please?
We got a couple questions. How many seats are proposed for this fast food restaurant?
That's a very good question. The seat is really based, have a different factor, as you know. It's based on, they divided it by the storage area, by the kitchen, by the sitting area. We really don't know exactly how many seats will be. Because like usually the storage, you divide the storage by 100 square foot. The dining area by 15. The kitchen by, 50. So each one, based on that, we calculate, we said, hey, it's 100 seat. Therefore, like City of Tampa, they say 25 parking space required. So we don't know exactly, but the best of my ability, the parking, let us say we have 27 parking we propose here, multiply by 4, which means adequate for 108, occupancy, which is seat, as you mentioned exactly. We don't know exactly because we don't know what the user will be. So possibly will be less than 3,300 square foot building. Might be, of course, not more, but might be less than that. So we are not sure, to be technically correct, how many seats can be.
Do I understand you correctly, sir, that
Yes, sir.
the existing building,
Yes.
in the phase 1 is going to be a reduction of that size?
To almost 50%.
And so actually the building's going to be cut,
That's correct.
a new wall put up? Okay.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay,
You see?
to make room for the,
The parking is all adjusted because that building is like cut,
Correct.
walls are cut out of it.
okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I didn't pick that up and I was wondering.
Sure.
Thank you.
Got another question about the parking
Sure.
spots. Are the parking spots still in place along the frontage road of 19?
Yes.
Okay, they're just light on this, and so it doesn't look like they're still part of the plan. That's why I was just trying to confirm that.
Well, we keep them all the same.
Okay.
Completely.
Those aren't being eliminated then?
No, not at all. We could not afford that, and completely as is, exactly.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask the planner a question on this?
Yes, use your microphone, please, Ms. Brothers.
Yes, I will, because no one can hear me. Correct me, my thinking isn't straight right now on the seating. If this is approved, and he's not sure of the seating with the parking that we have, and he has to have larger capacity of seating for whoever goes into this business, does he come back for a variance?
No, what would happen here is the parking calculation is based on the square footage of the use. That takes into account, there's a standard formula that was created, or many standard formulas that have been created. You've adopted a 1 per 80, so that's 1 space per 80 square feet of the use. In this case, that doesn't really differentiate freezer from seating area from kitchen. it assumes that entire building is dedicated to the fast food use and basically that drive-through use. As a result, that calculation is across the entire square footage, not specific to just the seating area. If they ask for additional square footage and they exceed the threshold of minor modification, they would come back through the process just like they're doing now. I mean, essentially, they're asking for a different type of square footage, a different use there. That's why they're coming back through this for that second phase. So the same thing would happen again, with the caveat that there is language in your land development code that TRC can allow for modifications of square footage. In this case, you're not talking about a very big building, so the percentage of modification that they can get on that building without having to come back is very, very small. Again, the smaller a building is, the smaller the square footage you can change without coming back through the process. The larger of a building is, the more you can change without coming back. And usually if they're cutting back a building, it's easier for everyone to swallow that than it is if they're increasing the size. And until they've really identified their vendor, it's going to be very hard to determine what that ultimate square footage is going to be with that fast food restaurant. But the parking is sufficient based on the square footage as it's shown today.
Okay, thank you. I asked the question because I specifically wanted it on the tape for the future minutes. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Any other questions of the applicant?
I have a question about just a landscaping aspect. It's designed to have Indian hawthorn along the frontage of 19 between the parking lot and 19. We have a requirement of a 3-foot shrubbery minimum.
Right.
That plant doesn't grow 3 feet tall, so that would be need to be changed from a landscaper's perspective.
Right.
You would want to use something. You have viburnum suspensum. That's a good shrub to use as a blockage. But Indian hawthorn, from just looking at it, does not grow 3 feet tall, so it wouldn't actually fall within our code that we have for parking lots.
We'll be more than happy to change it completely. I mean, the other aspect here, I thought you're going to ask me, you guys have enough landscaping. I think the staff, look exclusively into every tree, and even they ask us to plant it in the front and in the back area, as far as shrubs or, screening and trees there. But as far as the notification you brought it up, I think we're more than happy to revise it to something else.
Yeah, from experience, I mean, I know
Sure.
how plant growth is, and if it says something on the paper, but it's actually different what actually happens out in the real
Definitely.
world. So,
Definitely.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Any other questions of the applicant by the board members? Thank you, sir. Do you have anything else you want to say at this time?
Well, another project in this great city. Thank you so much for all the help from everybody.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
At this time, we will hear from members of the public, either in favor of or opposed to this project. Seeing none, I'll declare the public portion of the meeting closed, and now we're open for motion and discussion by the board.
I think parking is a concern. You look at McDonald's across the street. There's people that park in the frontage area in between 19 and McDonald's. Lucky Dill down the road. That's another issue. Mugs and Jugs is an issue on 19, and I think
But when they
Should
do
be
that, they're
concerned.
fined as well? They're-
that
When they do that, they're fined? Do you know that?
Not
My son owns a
necessarily.
restaurant and they're fined for those.
Yeah, but we have to set up success for this type of situation too. You've got these businesses that are next to the fast food restaurant proposed, and you're gonna have people parked in front of those, and then they're gonna put signs out there that say XYZ company parking only, and you're gonna create a headache. It's a valid concern, I think, that should be addressed, but it's falling within our guidelines, so.
I think what's happened at McDonald's is that we've just outgrown McDonald's.
Well-
When it first came, we didn't have
Anything.
anything. But as we have grown in our community and on the outskirts of the community, McDonald's has grown. And it is very dangerous there, especially when they're lined up. But they're eventually going to have to do something to have a bigger building and a bigger availability to get served. And as far as Lucky Dill, that's down in, they've allowed it. That's Highway 19. That's not us.
Yeah, it's not Tarpon.
And it is very dangerous, but I don't see, and I may be wrong, and I may have to eat this statement in the next 5 years, if I'm even here, that, I don't think we'll see that on this parcel. Hopefully we will. But I think in the future, we need to do something with the city that they can't park on those out parcels there. It's very dangerous, there's accidents, and it needs to be taken care of. I don't see it at Chili's at all. And, I don't look at it happening here, and hopefully it won't, but I think our planner has taken care of it. Hopefully.
Is there a motion?
So move for the approval of, I turned it over here, excuse me. Site plan, number 16-51, Tarpon Rental Plaza Resolution 2016-23.
Second.
There's a motion and second. I have a question. Mr. Carr brought up a good point about the height of the shrubbery,
Yes.
and the applicant expressed that he's willing to meet the code and have shrubbery, I guess, up to 3 feet tall, which is required by the code. Do we want to have that in the motion, or as one of the conditions? I assume that your motion includes the recommended conditions by the staff, 1 through 7.
Yes, it
8 has
does.
been deleted. Okay. Do you want to amend the motion to add that the landscaping shrubbery be at the height required by code?
I will amend the motion if the second will adhere to that.
That's fine.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to approve with the staff recommendations 1 through 7, and with an additional condition regarding the landscaping, height of landscaping shrubbery. We'll have a roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Protos?
Yes.
Mr. Carr?
Yes.
Mr. Seaman?
Yes.
Ms. St. Arnold?
Yes.
Chairman Vincent?
Yes. Thank you, sir.
Good. We're anxious to find out who's going in there. What fast food?
Yeah, right.
I'll give you
That's
some
what they all say.
suggestions of what we want here.
They learn their information.
We'll
from
tell
me.
you what we would like to have.
See you later.
Thank you. Good luck.
All right, order here on the board.
Sorry.
Question.
The next item on the agenda, item number 5, is application number 16-55. It's a site plan, Tarpon Turtle Overflow Parking Lot Resolution 2016-24. It's a request to approve a site plan for an overflow parking lot adjacent to the Tarpon Turtle. At this time, we'll hear from our staff and have the staff report.
Thank you. Heather Erwiller, Director of the Planning and Zoning Department for staff on this application. About a year ago, the proprietors of the Tarpon Turtle came before this board and later for the BOC to request a change in several lots along Lake Tarpon Avenue adjacent to the restaurant site. At that time, they had told us they wanted to do an overflow parking lot because they're having some issues with parking. There's issues with people parking along the roadway. There's a hill there. There's a number of safety issues. At that time, they didn't have a site plan design, so they just came through and they did the change in the land use. This is now basically following up on that change in the land use. At the time that this project went forward with the land use change at the board level, they were required by PPC and by your BOC to put a restrictive covenant on these properties that basically restricted the use in perpetuity to parking lot. If they ever choose to do anything other than a parking lot, they have to come back through the process to get rid of that restrictive covenant, and then they would have to go back through the design process. That being the case, this particular application is really for a parking lot. That parking lot is going to be mostly a grass parking lot. They are going to have paved access aisles, so there is some additional drainage that's required. This application actually has kind of been delayed from this board simply because we were waiting for SwiftMud to finally come through with their approval that they would accept the design for the water, because being that it's so close to the lake, they have some complications with water flow up and down a hill. So as a result, we now have in your backup a letter from SwiftMud that they will accept the design as proposed. So at this time, the only concerns that staff has is, I'm just going to go through the specifics of what they're proposing, but there's no other concerns that staff really has outside of that stormwater issue that has been addressed at this point. So the proposed parking area consists of 65 grass parking spaces, paved access aisles, landscaping, and an associated stormwater conveyance system. The applicant has provided the appropriate buffers to the adjacent residential units, which are actually shown on a separate sheet. You have a separate sheet in your packet that was like an addition with their landscaping plan. The applicant is providing the buffers adjacent to the residential. The 7 trees are proposed to be removed, and the applicant will be installing sufficient trees in the required buffers and the landscaping areas to compensate for the removal of trees. The trees proposed to be removed range in size from 5 inches to 17 inches in diameter as measured at breast height. The applicant is not requesting the change in the future land use, as that's already happened. They're not requesting a change in the proposed zoning category. That's already happened. At this time, staff finds the technical review team determined that the application met the site design approval standards and was complete in compliance with the above reference standard. The site plan is consistent with your future land use plan and the corresponding policies of the comprehensive plan. The Board of Commissioners required the use again of that restrictive covenant. The proposed use and site plan are consistent with the restrictive covenant that was placed on the property. The proposed project meets the concurrency management standards in section. In this case, what applies is not traffic and what you're generally used to. It's really the stormwater issue, because there's no expansion of the restaurant use. It's only an overflow parking. You don't have to look at additional water usage. You're not looking at additional traffic generation. You're not looking at additional wastewater or solid waste disposal. So it's very limited in what you're actually looking for under that concurrency analysis, really to that they're meeting their stormwater management requirements. With that, staff, there is an ERP permit that was provided to the city, which is in the application, and the project was required to meet the city's building code upon application for construction drawings and individual permits. With that, the staff has several conditions. Those conditions are we are recommending approval, and we have several conditions. The developer is responsible for requiring all other jurisdictional permits for approvals for meeting the minimum criteria of the Land Development Code, including the compliance with Article XVII Public Art Program. The applicant must mitigate for tree removal at the time of permitting pursuant to LDC Section 133.06. Any lighting to be installed on site is to be shielded and directed internal to the site. Construction plans shall be consistent with the approved site plan. The payment of all requisite fees attendant to the project shall be paid in accordance with the Land Development Code, and the site plan shall expire within 1 year of the effective date unless the application has been filed for a building permit with construction plans signed and sealed by a registered engineer licensed in the state of Florida. And with that, I can answer any questions.
Thank you. Board members, questions for the staff at this time?
I've got a couple questions. Is there a grade difference between is it the townhomes or apartments or condos that this abuts to?
The townhomes and condos are above this area, even though this is on a hill that goes down to the lake. They're actually up above, slightly above where the restaurant is, and then the hill goes down.
So there's not gonna be an issue of runoff going into those facilities?
No, the condos are completely separate. The water's not going to go to them. They're actually higher than the restaurant.
Okay. I want to just confirm that. And also, I think that's the crest of the hill is kind of right in the middle of that, if I remember correctly. Is there any issues with line of sight with what they have designed that you've seen coming out of the parking lots if someone's flying over the hill?
They have designed in the required visibility triangle, and as a result, there shouldn't be any issue with people coming down the hill. Again, folks are coming down that hill. They shouldn't be exceeding the speed limit. But in the event that there are sidewalks there that any pedestrians that are in there, and then folks that are in those drive aisles. They're not grass drive aisles, which is much better than if they were grass. You'd be slipping on them and that type of thing if you go to stop. At least we have hard surfaces that people are going to be driving on, which is a benefit to the community for that type of issue.
Yeah, is there a sidewalk going in here?
There's a
can't-
sidewalk already existing along that area, so
Okay.
it's really hard to kind of tell because the plan's kind of busy. They were trying to make it attractive, so it became a little busy. But yeah, there is a sidewalk along that basically goes down to the Tarpon Turtle on that side.
And then they're removing the house. Is that a house on there?
The
or-
house is already gone.
Okay, it's already gone. Okay.
I went out there to look at it. I really don't see any intrusion on the residents with that parking lot, but has that been addressed in any way? Any type of a buffer that you recommended?
They're not required. It's RM, so they're not required to have. They're buffering to that one parcel that's in the middle, which actually is RM. They would try to acquire that and were unable to acquire that because of it's basically owned by the condo association, and trying to get everybody to agree to sell that property didn't happen. So as a result, they've actually had, and I'll let the applicant speak to this, they've actually had the condo association kind of had a change of heart now that the parking lot's imminent, that it's going in, and they're actually doing some design improvements to kind of allow easier access for those folks down to the restaurant. And I'll kind of let the applicant speak to those things that they've kind of negotiated. But that being the case, they do have the buffer requirement they have there. The difficulty with the buffer requirement is the condos are above this. So any buffering that they're going to have, it's going to take a while for trees and shrubs to grow in to provide anything. It will provide some soundproofing, but since they're using a grass parking lot, I don't think you're going to have the same sound issues that they were really thinking they were going to have as a result of just not having the pavement. So pavement really kind of really magnifies sound. If you've got ground and you've got a lot of open spaces around you, they are putting in trees and shrubs and those type of things. They're going to muffle that sound. That had been one of the concerns that the folks at the condo association had kind of talked about. So they really at this particular point they're going to install a wall, but it's not going to make it to the level of where these condos are, because the grade change is that significant between these properties.
And I don't even see car lights interfering with them at all.
I don't think so, because they're a lot higher. I mean,
They're
even the
higher,
lower
I know.
even the lower units within that, because that is an undulating hill that's up there that they're on, and so as a result, it's going to be limited, the folks that are impacted, if at all, by any lights that are coming up, because of they're just at a higher elevation.
And the reason I mentioned that is because when they first came, that was one of the questions that someone had asked, looking back at the notes.
Thank you, Ms. Broadus. I'm happy to see that you've included, as on number 3, the condition that any lighting installed on that site will be shielded and directed internal to the site. So that, I'm glad to see that you've included that as a staff recommendation. As you know, the board has been concerned about excessive outdoor lighting and its effects on neighboring landowners and residents. Any other questions of the staff?
I've got a question. Is that a sign, or what is that? It says small boat.
They are actually integrating a small boat into the actual landscaping design. It's actually not going to be the sign. They actually going to do separate freestanding signs. That's one of the problems that have been there for the turtles had, is they really don't have a way of capturing traffic, pass-by traffic, because they're tucked down in a neighborhood. So they've asked to do some additional signage, and they wanted to include that boat as kind of a design element into their parking lot, and there's really nothing in our code that restricts folks from doing that. It's kind of like lawn art or that type of thing, and it's a nice addition really to make it just a little bit more attractive.
As long as it doesn't hold water and breed mosquitoes.
Since you talked about signage, is there a spot? I just don't see it in the plans where the signs would actually be.
They're kind of still in the cursory determination of kind of where those signs are going to be and how they're going to look. So that's never really included. At this point, you're very preliminary in the process. So folks don't really spend the money to determine really where the signs are going to be located, generally on the plans. So they're still in the process of doing that. Once they have those signs in there, we'll have a better feel for that. But right now, they're not located.
What about like sign square footage? I know that was an issue like on the Historic Preservation Board about the amount of square footage of sign that you have. Since this is like separate properties technically from the Tarpon Turtle, does that make a difference, or is it like the Tarpon Turtle signage?
It's
like,
one unified project. So like they don't currently have a sign or a freestanding sign, at least at the Tarpon Turtle. The signage is on the building. So as a result, they have now the entire frontage there to calculate their sign square footage based on. But again, that is set up, it's outside the historic district, so as a result, they would be based on, if it's commercial property, they have a standard set sign square footage that they get, and even though they've got additional linear feet, there is a maximum, and it's 150 max square feet. So regardless of how big their actual lot frontage is, they're going to be restricted by the maximum that's out there.
I knew it was outside of the historic district. I just
But it's
guidelines.
drastically different. The historic district is very restrictive in the size that you can actually do. It's a very restrictive sign code with good reason.
Any other questions for staff?
I've got a question about this. Another sign question though, because you have residents across the street that their house would look into the parking lots. So if the sign's illuminated, is there something along the lines that say the signs have to turn off at a certain hour? Or something along those lines?
There's nothing specific in the sign code that requires the signs to turn off at any point in time in any type of commercial district. And in fact, this is a commercial district. If you wanted to do something like that, we'd have to defer to the attorney whether or not, there would be a restriction on you putting a restriction on that they can't have a non-illuminated sign, or putting a restriction on the lighting feature of the sign. You can ask for those types of things as part of the site planning process. We just need to verify with the attorney that we're not getting into an area that, exceeds your authority. But generally, there is nothing in your code that specifically says that at 9 o'clock all the signs turn off. It's when you're in the district.
Can we include the lighting on the sign to be under the same item of lighting installed on the site to be shielded?
That works if it's not internally lit. If it's internally lit where the lighting's inside, you're still going to have that refractive thing, and there's no way of dealing with that. If you're using like white lights, like an outside, like you do with flags and that type of thing, those are easily controlled.
Right.
But if it's internally lit, which they would be allowed to do that in this particular district, that's not going to work for that. So it just would. You're really getting now down to how you want the sign to be and that type of thing. And obviously we want the applicant to come up here and talk to us if you're going to get into regulating what their signs and stuff are going to look like, because that's something that they're going to need to be part of that discussion.
I don't have any further questions.
Okay, at this time, we'd like to hear from the applicant. Please state your name and address when you arrive at the podium, sir.
Good evening, board members. My name is Brian Barker. I'm a civil engineer with Duell & Associates, 565 South Hercules Avenue in Clearwater, and I have been sworn in.
Thank you, sir.
Just to speak to a couple items that I heard. The main challenge with designing this parking lot was indeed the grade changes across the property. It varies from about average of 8 feet in grade difference if you're up at the condos going downhill to the parking lot. So there was quite a challenge in, making it kind of blend into the side of the hill. So once this parking lot's constructed, I don't see how there will be any impacts to the condos that will be sitting up on the hill. There will be a gradual slope down to a wall and then a drive aisle with grass parking. I know the owners have had meetings with some of the residents over there, and I think by absence of any of those residents here tonight or any phone calls to the planning department, to my knowledge, I think they've kind of smoothed over any concerns that they would have about impacts. The second item regarding the site lighting, the owner doesn't plan to put any site lighting in at this point, so that's not even on their radar. With that, parking's desperately needed, and they're really anxious to get it in there and solve some ongoing issues. So I'll be happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Thank you, sir. Questions from the board of the applicant?
I've just got a quick question. Is the grass area irrigated? Because I know that's like a sugar sand area of like the I guess the height of an old sand dune of some sort. I just know from living in Florida, I've been stuck in the sand before myself, and so if you don't have it irrigated, it tends to turn back in the
That's-
sand, so.
That is a good question. Normally it is. It is irrigated? I didn't put together the landscape plan. We had a landscape architect do it, so sorry I didn't know that answer.
All right, thanks.
Any other questions of the applicant? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll hear from the public. If there's anyone in the public that wishes to speak in favor of this site plan, please come forward. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Seeing none, I'll declare the public portion of the meeting closed, and we'll go to the board for comments and action.
This is like really needed in this area, so it's encouraging to see this come up before us, because I know the residents have to be frustrated with all the cars parking in all the neighborhood streets and stuff. I've been frustrated trying to find parking spots there.
I'm assuming that residents were notified in the condo association. Did they receive notice?
Not for the site plan. They were notified during the regular process, but we do not have a requirement in our land development code to notify for site plans. I don't know why you guys didn't go that step and do that, but we do not have that requirement, so being that staff doesn't take in any money for these applications to advertise, I don't have any means to advertise generally for them, so.
That's something we're gonna have to bring up and try to get passed.
I
so
think maybe
everyone
this
will know.
should maybe look at, in the future, taking a look at that notice procedure. We certainly would like all citizens affected by something to receive notice. Because I know before they've had a lot of objections, but I think, and it sounds like they've been at least working with them, so I'm assuming that they've got some knowledge of what's going on with the site plan.
The residents knew that the site plan was imminent when we went through the land development process. We made them aware of like the next steps, what the process was when we talked about at the board, because I mean they followed us all the way through. They came to all the meetings, so as a result, they followed us through that process. So they were made aware of the steps that they'll be taking, and they could contact our office at any point and check with us to find out, if an application's been filed. This was filed pretty quick. It's just they've kind of been working through issues to address the grade change is just that drastic here, and they've gone through a couple different iterations of drainage. So
I'd like for the attorney to advise us at our next meeting or whenever she can what we need to do to make sure that next time if an issue like this comes up, everybody is notified. I've always stood for everybody being notified, and they don't really think about the process. Not saying that they would come up and object to anything, but everyone has a right to be notified of an upcoming issue that could affect them or be next to them. So if we have to ask the commission to pass something, or we pass something, that this doesn't ever happen again.
Thank you, Ms. Brothers. I think also on a wider, I know we're a little bit off topic, just talking about in general notice, and it's not particular to this particular application. But I think we need to look further into not just this notice of site plans, but notice in other situations, and maybe we can make that as a discussion item on the agenda coming up.
we can. Site plans are really the only action that you guys take that don't have some type of notice. I mean, most of your other applications either require a sign, or they require postcards, or a signed postcard and an advertisement in the newspaper. It just depends on which type of application we're talking about. Site plans is the one thing that you guys, action that you take here that only goes on your agenda. So I can certainly put that on agenda for a future, but it would require amendment to the ordinance. I mean, that's the process.
Well, yes, but if we can at least get it on the agenda to speak about. Also, there's some situation for the 200-foot notice requirement. Sometimes, in practicality, depending on the configuration of the landowners, there may not be anyone getting a notice. And say if there's a historic district involved, if you only give notice to the folks within 200 feet, it would impact maybe a whole district. And so we might want to take a broader look, as well as the technology that we have now. The city manager has a Facebook site that, things could be posted on that and get wide audience through that, as well as the website for the city. So we might want to look at the use of technology rather than just the postage of mailing notices. But that's for a future day, and I would appreciate if we can get it on an agenda coming
We
up
need a
soon.
motion for that?
No, that's a
Okay.
side item. We're not gonna take a
All right.
motion
Get
on
a
that.
motion for this?
We need a motion. We don't have a motion on the floor now.
I'll make a motion that we accept application 16-55 for the site plan approval for Tarpon Turtle for the overflow parking lot.
Second.
There's a motion and second. Any discussion on the motion?
Yeah, I want to congratulate them on the work that they did for this parking lot. It's a plus, and I know it was hard, but you've given Tarpon a beautiful, beautiful area to go eat, see the gators in the water, the little one that comes up to the dock there, and your food is good, and I congratulate you and wish you the best of luck.
We'll have a roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Protos?
Yes.
Mr. Carr?
Yes.
Mr. Seaman?
Yes.
Ms. St. Arnold?
Yes.
Chairman Vincent?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck.
The next item on our agenda is item number 6, application 16-67, annexation and rezoning request for Monaco Inc. It's ordinance number 2016-11 and ordinance 2016-12. It's a request to annex and rezone .96 acres of real property located at 1525 Rainville Road. And we'll begin with a report from the staff.
Okay, again, this is an annexation of approximately 9.6 acres into the city of Tarpon Springs, provided for industrial limited land use and on the Tarpon Springs future land use map, and providing for rezoning of IR industrial restricted land use on the official zoning map of Tarpon Springs. Essentially, this property is actually adjacent to the RO plant, even though it's on a different road. It is adjacent to our city limits. The RO plant touches directly to this property. As a result, all the other area around it is in Pinellas County. It's zoned, it has a future land use of either M1 or IR. And it has a zoning of M1 or a future land use of industrial limited or target employment. Target employment is actually an overlay district that was put over the industrial district in Pinellas County. It really corresponds to the countywide plan. The countywide plan changed their designations last summer, and as a result, everything kind of came in line. The county kind of changed their land uses to match and that type of thing. We haven't gone that route. Our industrial limited category allows for all of the same uses as the uses that are currently allowed in that target employment center, so it's really not, there's really no benefit to the city to follow suit in that case. But the property contains approximately 41,818 square feet, and it contains one office building with some additional property adjacent to it. The property is currently conforming to the assigned zoning of the M1 light manufacturing industrial district within Pinellas County, as well as being in compliance with the existing land use. The land uses for industrial limited in our own district. The owner and applicant is requesting to annex into the city of Tarpon and to amend the zoning to the IR industrial restrictive district. The current property size of 9.6 area is currently used as a payroll processing and construction services establishment. The applicant is seeking this voluntary annexation to allow connection to city utilities. They're having some issues with utilities, and this is a common reason why folks are coming to us and asking about future annexation and hooking to our utility system. Is there is some increases in the permitting requirements for new septic systems and that type of thing. So people are having issues with their septics and wells and that type of thing, and as a result are seeking to connect as a first measure, seeking to connect with the city, which is obviously a better situation for them if they can either annex into the city and connect to our system, or if they go through a restrictive covenant process, which our code does allow for if they're not contiguous to our boundary. In this case, they are contiguous, and the applicant has received written confirmation from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection after well water testing that the well on site is tainted with arsenic, and the property owner would need to approach the city to seek that voluntary annexation in order to have the potable drinking water on site. The property is contiguous, and then we're going to go through the review criteria for the annexation. The property is contiguous to the existing Tarpon Springs municipal limits on the west side. Again, that's the RO plant that this abuts, the RO plant and the fire station. The annexation will not create an enclave. The property is within the wastewater treatment facilities area, within the potable water service area, and a line is present within the existing sewer service area and within the fire protection service area. The applicant will be connecting to the city's utility services. And again, this goes through the whole discussion for the planning district and that type of thing, which you guys have seen on multiple occasions, so I'm gonna fast forward through that. You know that we have agreements in place with Pinellas County for this type of thing to annex in as long as they're in our service area and we can provide service, which we can in this particular case. Yes, the property owner has voluntarily agreed pursuant to the application on file with the Planning and Zone Department. The proposed intensity of the property is equal to that it's addressed in the Pinellas County Comprehensive Plan. It's the same category. We're going from the same category in their land use plan to our same category in our land use plan. That's why we don't have a future land use amendment added. There's no need for it. Really what needs to change here is the zoning that we're annexing in. So when they do come forward, if they want to add a building or they want to do something else with that property, that they have the zoning in place to do that in the future. The intensity of the future land use in the Tarpon Springs Comprehensive Plan and Zoning Map Amendment for the official zoning map respectively are consistent with the intensities addressed in the current Pinellas County Comprehensive Plan and the Pinellas County Land Development Code and for the subject property. The technical review team reviewed the project on July 26th for completeness and conformance with the comprehensive plan and the zoning and land development code, and had the following comments, which essentially is that they approved. We have had no requests for any information on this particular request. It's not surprising. It's down kind of off of a side road, and even with the big wonderful signs that we have in bright yellow, there has been no concerns from any of the neighbors on this. And staff has a recommendation of approval of the request for the annexation, the rezoning from the M1 district to the RI district. And with that, I can answer any questions that you might have.
Questions by the board members for staff?
I just have a question about the utilities. Since there's like since it's touching the city portion behind the property, I mean, are they going to dig up the whole road where everyone's not like part of the city and put in utilities in for that one property? Is that how that works?
We actually have a line that's out on the that's out in the front existing on this. So while it's not serving this particular property at this particular time, it is serving other properties. Okay. So at this time, because I asked the utility guys a lot of these questions because I want to know how they're connecting too, because their existing building is way up on the other side. It's far away from the RO plant, but there are existing lines in the area that they're just going to extend down a water line for this area. So now that they're coming down to this property, what they'll do is they'll expand down a big enough line that any additional people up in that area that would want to connect, now that this is becoming, if everybody agrees to annex it in, if it becomes annexed in, you can then, periodically extend that line further out as other folks are having this problem, because if they're having the problem with a tainted well in the area, it's going to be an ongoing issue there. So as a result, it's something that we definitely want to be aware of, and we want to accommodate folks where we can with this type of issue. We certainly want to provide clean water to folks.
Yeah, and our city has many wells in that area too, so I hope ours are being tested as just like theirs are.
Yeah, and I know we do a lot of testing on a regular basis with our wells, but it is kind of disconcerting because it's the different places that are coming up with issues like this are all in areas where our wells are, so it's kind of scary.
This is similar to an issue we had not too long ago regarding an annexation request for the utilities hookup, and at that time you explained that the way the ordinance is, they have to be annexed in the city in order to hook up to our utilities.
That's correct.
Or it was just a fee.
Additional fees. They pay a 20% surcharge on top, but if they are contiguous on any property boundary, they must voluntarily annex in.
Okay. Well, since even though there is some continuity here with the city-owned property, it's in the city. I don't have an objection to it. Like I did in the last one where it was just out by itself and was surrounded by county. But it would be nice, since there's other folks that want to hook up, if the city utilities folks can, maybe make it more attractive, or they don't have to go through an annexation. process. But
That's the result of your water bonds, unfortunately. The way your bonding was done, a lot of times those provisions come in as a result of that. So unfortunately, we'd have to go back to our bonding agency and ask for relief.
we haven't paid off those bonds yet? Okay. Any other questions of staff? The applicant, would you like to say anything on behalf of the application? Okay.
I just have another question from staff.
Go ahead.
Do we notify like the other property owners and like, hey, you now have a property that's connected to the city of Tarpon Springs if you'd like to annex in? I mean, is that notification, is that something that goes out from our city, or is that, you know?
We don't notify folks that, now there's a contiguous boundary, that their contiguous boundary has moved specifically into your area, and there's now water and wastewater. It's up to them if they have an interest to come to us, because essentially you're poaching the county's customers, really. And as a result of that, we will provide whatever facilities we can, where we can. The process is what it is, Unfortunately, I agree with you, Chairman. This is a really hard process for somebody who just wants to get a well. They go through a lot of steps to get there, but unfortunately, this is what we have for them. With that, we don't really have a process of notification. That's something that I can kind of talk to the city manager. It might be something that the public service folks, where utilities now is, might be interested in doing something like that, with that when we do an annexation like this, wherever that line is, wherever properties are contiguous, maybe sending out just postcards like we do for our applications that, it's now in the area. If you're interested, please contact us. But we've moved our utility request system to a web-based. There's actually a form now for you to ask that question, because that came into planning and zoning. I inherited the utility availability statement process. So now what happens is folks now go on the web, they plug in their information, and we get an email in planning, and an email goes to utilities. We provide that information directly to them. So we at least are making it strides to make it more user-friendly, but we aren't currently doing any kind of outreach to folks on that. But that's something I can certainly ask the Public Service Director to consider.
Thank you. Any other questions? Are there any comments? I have to ask it. Anyone from the public wish to speak either in favor of or in opposition to this application? It's dark out there, but I don't see anyone. Hearing none, the public portion of the hearing is closed, and the board will consider a motion and action.
I'll make a motion that we accept application 16-67, the annexation and rezoning 1525 Rainbow Road.
Second.
There's a motion and second. Any discussion on the motion? Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Protos?
Yes.
Mr. Parker? Mr. Carr?
Yes.
Mr. Seaman?
Yes.
Ms. St. Arnold?
Yes.
Chairman Vincent?
Yes. Thank you very much, ma'am. Good luck. At this time, we are ready for staff comments.
Okay, I don't have too much to say, other than I have a couple of things that I just want to bring to your attention. I'm going to try in the very near future to at least put together some basic information on what you guys had discussed about the Dark Skies Initiative, and kind of just pass it around for information purposes. I might just get some interest from you guys on, what you're most interested in looking at. It could take me a really long time to write a piece of legislation that would make sense here if I really don't know what you guys are going after. So what I would like to do is, just under the staff comment section, we'll bring back probably the issue with with advertising and that type of thing, because I think that's a shorter piece. And then once I've given you guys some time to digest that Dark Skies information, I'll probably give you a lot of it by email. It just seems to be the best way to do that, because there's some websites and things that I can forward over to you with links. Kind of keep your notes of what you're interested in going after, and then we'll kind of come back and say, okay, these are the things that we want to kind of discuss. And if you guys want to correspond, obviously don't correspond with each other, but if you have ideas or things that you want to send directly to me so that I kind of spam them out to everybody else, certainly do that. And I will include everybody, on those ongoing discussions of, this point or that point, maybe we don't need this. Because obviously we don't want to make it too complex for folks, but we want to make it so it's going to be an effective tool for this board to utilize. So I'll probably start doing that in the very near future. I have a few resources that I've kind of collected at this point. When I've had 5-10 minutes to just surf the net, I don't get that much time to do that kind of thing. But I'm going to have that ongoing because I'd like to start tackling some of those issues that you guys have asked about into the new year. Now that we're getting caught up on your minutes, that's like the next big thing I really want to go after is those things that you guys have kind of indicated to me, and bring those forward at least for you to kind of discuss.
Thank you very much. On the topic of the dark sky measure and involving excessive lighting, there is a book in the library that if any of the board members want to check it out, I recommend it highly. It's what got me interested in the topic, basically, and it's produced by the Dark Sky Association, and it's very informative. And of course, their website has some model ordinances I'm sure that you're familiar with, that you can take a look at those on their website or download it and then take a look at it. Obviously, not all of it's going to be applicable to what our concerns are, and so we sort of need to take a look at that and figure out what sections we can X out, not worry about, and then modify the ones that we think would be appropriate. Any other comments from staff?
That's all that I have.
When's our next
Madam
meeting?
Attorney?
No comments here.
Okay, we're ready then for board comments.
Is the next meeting on the 17th of October?
Yes.
Okay.
And is there one that week of Thanksgiving?
I don't know yet. Right now, I know there'll be one in October because I have active applications that'll be coming forward to you. Right now, November, I'm not out that far as this particular board is concerned. So I'll let you know. That's so that I can send out to you guys once I know when we get a little bit farther along. But we have kind of slowed down in planning and zoning as far as getting new plans. Now we're just trying to clean up what is running through the process. But there's always, new projects on the horizon for you.
I would like to thank each of the board members. I think that I noticed tonight, but it's been going on, that our comments have been to the point, our questions have been to the point. We're not rambling on a lot, and I appreciate that because everyone's time is valuable. We'd all like to be home with our families and doing whatever we want to do in the evenings. And so I do appreciate not only your attendance here in the evenings, but that we keep our comments and questions to the issue that's before us, and I do appreciate that. Thank you very much. Mr. Carr, I appreciate your expertise in landscaping issues because I don't know much about them at all, and you have a lot of wealth of information, and I appreciate you sharing that with the board. Any other comments from the board?
Do you want these packets back?
Yeah, anybody who doesn't want their packets, I don't want to have to require applicants to bring in new pieces if I can.
Now, I have a question.
Yes.
Because there's a building uptown, the historic building. It's where the zone used to be. And the historic window panes were taken out, the historic glass, got modern stuff in the glass upstairs, and they're doing work on the building. When they come in for a permit with a historic building, does that permit go to the historic board here in the city? Who watches out? Because when those windows were taken out, as you well know, I was up here lickety split complaining, and I was told, well, we gave them permission. And when I asked about the historic board, they said, well, what about it? Well, when you are a historic designated Main Street community and that building is, aren't they supposed to go through the historic board here in the city?
They were, for certain aspects of that of any building in the historic district, it depends on what they're doing. There are some things that they can do because they don't regulate color and certain things. There are some things that they can do to the building. But the windows specifically, he needed to come back through the process. The reason why it went the way it was is Anthony was not aware that there were any different changes to the building. And he didn't know that those windows were there. When I went and found all the historical pictures and brought them down to him, he then cited him. Why it's taken the applicant this long to get to us, I don't know. They are scheduled to go before the HPB board in October But why it took that long is a very good question. It's one of those things that Anthony cites them, and then they have to come to us. I don't have an enforcement arm in planning and zoning, so as a result, I'm bound by the two that I have. I have code enforcement, I have Anthony's folks in building development. Depending upon the code violation, it depends on which one that it comes through. But I really cannot get either one, whether it's a code enforcement violation or whether it's a building code violation. I really cannot get those applicants to comply. With the intent is that we want them to comply, but I can't force them. I can't force their compliance. All that we can do is cite them through that process and then let the process run its course. So that's why sometimes it takes some time before an applicant gets it, that they need to come and see us so that they can go before the board to make, I don't know what reparations he's gonna make on that building at this point.
Work
It's
on
been
weekends.
removed.
They work
So-
on weekends. And the sad part is, I can't believe an employee in the city, in the building department, doesn't know about the historic, issue. I will have to go see the city manager about that, because if he doesn't, we've lost, and we can also lose our historic designation.
Well, it's not that he didn't know, he just didn't know that the changes on the window, because it was a drastic change. The problem that you have is there's a wire that goes across there, so if you're just driving by, you don't see that, because it still seems like there's a line there. The line doesn't physically exist, and until they went in and we pulled the actual historic, I mean, I have stuff going back to horse and buggy in front of it, okay? So
Well, the
we
windows
have
are
the
different now.
windows set with a window, pictures going back that far. So we gave those pictures to Anthony. Once he realized that there really was a problem, he did go out and cite the
The
applicant.
window frame is different now, different design, and to get that glass back is very hard and very expensive. And that's one of the items that puts us on the historic docket, is what we've got there. And I'm concerned, and it's gone all the way across now, and I'm concerned that, we don't lose, anything with our historic, designation on. I don't know the man, I don't know what he's doing, I don't even know if he owns the building or what's happening, but when I saw that was taken out, that's part of our historic heritage here. And it's the Fernal Building, and it has a lot of history to it, and I hated to see it happen.
Thank you, Ms. Broadus, for the comments. Any other board member comments? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor?
All right.
We're adjourned. It is 8:15 PM. Thank you.